Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. Yesterday, Canadian Conservatives chose their new leader. What does that mean for the party and Canadians in general? Stephen Harper united a fractured right and kept the Conservatives in power for nearly a decade.
When the next time comes, this party will offer Canadians a strong and clear alternative based on our Conservative values.
Potential star candidates, James Moore and Peter MacKay, passed on the chance to run for his job.
Simply put, I love my family more.
Jason Kenney left federal politics.
I've decided to seek the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta.
Rona Ambrose became interim leader.
Well, I'm here. I'm not sure if that's a reflection of a new tone, but my colleagues chose me.
Last year, the real race got underway. Kelly Leitch got a lot of attention.
We must not be afraid to talk about our Canadian values.
Many said a big factor in Harper's loss was the decision to sow division about Muslims. But Leitch stuck with it, wanting to screen immigrants for Canadian values.
A lot of people in Canada think you are sort of the Canadian version of Donald Trump.
The race got very crowded, with 13 candidates debating. Then, reality TV star Kevin O'Leary showed up.
We're going to have to take a big spatula to Ottawa and scrape all that crap out.
Bonjour, mes amis.
He soon dropped out, citing his lack of support in Quebec. O'Leary threw his support behind Libertarian Maxime Bernier, who promised radical change. Bernier was seen as the frontrunner right up until the final ballot last night.
And the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada with 51% of the vote.
Le prochain chef, Andrew Scheer.
Saskatchewan MP Andrew Scheer has been called Stephen Harper 2.0, pro-status quo. But he won with a lot of support from social conservatives who want change to outlaw gay marriage and abortion.
Individual members of Parliament have the right to speak out on issues for things that they believe in. That's a fundamental principle of our party.
I'm joined by our panelists. Tasha Keridan is a radio host and columnist with iPolitics. Adrian Batra is editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun. Supriya Dwivedi is a talk radio host in Toronto. And Jonathan Kay was, until recently, editor of Walrus magazine. Now he's an author and columnist with the National Post. So for obvious reasons, Tasha and Adrian, I'm going to start with you guys watching this yesterday. What did you think? Everyone, not everyone, but seemed like most people thought that Bernier maybe not had it in the bag, but was the most likely winner. What happened?
Well, people did think he was the most likely. I don't think anyone thought he had it in the bag. And I think that there was partly a social conservative support that did come from two candidates, Pierre Lemieux and Brad Trost, who did, and particularly Trost, unexpectedly well, and probably threw, according to calculations, about 75% of their support to Scheer. He also won, though, because he had support from the milk lobby, the Union des Producteurs Agricoles. You can call it the 1% solution, because he won by a very small margin because he had a lot of those people signed up in Quebec opposing what Maxime Bernier stood for, which was ending supply management. So those were, I think, two of the main factors. He was a likable candidate. He was a consensus builder. I think the party was looking for that, too.
Did Bernier blow it?
I don't think he blew it. I think that there may have been some semblance of arrogance in the last couple of weeks where they didn't have him out as much, and but the challenge, of course, is the ballots were already cast in all across the country. There were a few thousand people that actually still voted on the ground at the convention in the hall, which may have been part of the difference as well, because it was such a small margin. But there's clearly Scheer's organizers were very good in Quebec. They sold those memberships. They had great organization across Western Canada for sure, and taking that out east. So he did something right, but it's interesting to see that how everything was unfolding last night, watching their faces. I think they were both genuinely surprised at the result.
Do you think that Bernier blew it? I'll move on to you guys in just a sec. But
well, I think there is part of that. There may have been an aspect because his speech that he gave the night before was not a victory speech, really. I mean, it was a victory speech as opposed to a candidate speech.
This is the night before
the night before, yes. Yeah. And he gave a very long video of himself and then a very short cursory thank you.
That's right.
And he said apparently he was going to give the speech the next day when I guess he thought he would win. Well, of the people who voted yesterday, when you consider the small amount, the 1.9% or whatever differential between himself and Scheer, maybe that did make a difference in some of those people's minds because they thought he might have been taking it for granted.
What was your takeaway from this, Supriya? And were you surprised?
No, I mean, even when we were doing the pre-analysis of this, I felt like Scheer always had a very good chance. If you talk to anybody who worked in a Conservative backroom in the past or who was a former Harper staffer, most of them were very pro gung-ho Scheer. It wasn't just like, oh, I'll vote for Scheer out of, because there's nobody else. It was like, I am really voting for Scheer. So I do think there was a level of arrogance, as both Tasha and Adrian have pointed out. But I think also people very much underestimated Scheer's organization in Quebec. And I think it was largely a supply management vote, getting their vote out there. But also I think people maybe wanted more of a consensus builder. And I think Andrew Scheer definitely brings different factions of the Conservative tent together.
What did you think of what happened last night?
Well, in terms of the question of whether Bernier blew it, I think if he did blow it, he blew it in the most honorable way possible, which was on principle saying that supply management is not the right policy for Canada. It screws consumers, so it can benefit a small number of milk producers and or dairy producers generally. So I thought if he was going to go out and if he was going to lose votes, that was the issue to do it on. I thought it was an honorable position to take. I think most economists would agree with him. At least one person in the race was speaking forcefully for what should be bedrock Conservative policy that helps consumers.
I think it was the silliest hill to die on, though.
I don't think it's a silly hill.
No, I think, no, because he emphasized it. He emphasized it in every speech. And while I agree with him and I agree with the policy, at the same time, it's never going to be a ballot question for Canadians. It basically inflamed a small group of people. And we all know that when you've got a small group of people with a big cause, they're going to fight for it. So he created an opposition that he didn't need to have to such a degree. He could have made it one of his policies, but not bring it out.
And
in
they
every
were
speech.
very vocal about it.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily disagree with you. I mean, I'm the same view you are with respect to the supply management issue, and yes, economists as well. But because of the way that this balloting system was weighed and the ridings, and not to get too into the weeds about it, picking that one controversial issue and you give it to a very vocal minority that may never have voted for Conservatives anyway, you gave them that platform.
Except I would say that pundits are always saying we want these campaigns to be about ideas and we want them to be about principles.
They weren't appealing to pundits, though. They were appealing to the base, right?
Except that here's someone who actually was talking about ideas and acting on principle, and then I don't think you can blame him for then maybe being impolitic. Yeah, he probably alienated some people, but at least just like Martha Hall Finley put this issue for the Liberals on the agenda, maybe this will be something on the agenda at least for coming years.
Tasha, you raised this earlier, much was made of the support that he received from the social conservatives within the party. Do you see change coming from that?
I don't think I see the change they may want, which is maybe a change to our abortion laws. Scheer's been very clear that he's not going to bring forward any change of that nature from the party, should they be in power and a position to do so. I think, though, if the party did get into power, you might see tinkering at the margins, like Stephen Harper did, which was defunding abortion overseas, for example, setting up the Religious Freedoms Office, which was something that appealed to religious and chiefly, I would say, evangelical and Christian groups to address persecution of Christians overseas, these kinds of things. But I don't think that if they're looking for massive change, i.e. a change in the abortion law per se, that they will get that.
Supriya, do you see these debates about, he's also on the record as being anti-gay marriage, do you see those debates coming back?
I do to a degree, because I think you have the people that put him there, and I think the Campaign Life Coalition put out a presser that essentially said, we delivered 11,000 votes for you, so guess what? Now you're going to have to sort of, listen to us a little bit, and I think arguably he does, even though if he may say he doesn't want to reopen the abortion debate, he no longer wants to reopen the debate onto same-sex marriage or what have you. I think if you look at his voting record and you look at the people who propelled them there, I think Canadians are right to be a little bit wary. It did take Stephen Harper quite a bit of time to assuage a lot of those fears, and I think if Andrew Scheer is going to do that, he has to show us his true colors, essentially.
I found it really interesting today that the website, it appears that Andrew Scheer was as surprised as some of the pundits were. His website, all of the policies have been expunged for the moment. He wasn't giving a press conference or many interviews. Yeah. Was he ready? Like, where is he? Is there a plan? Can he unite everybody?
Well, I don't know why people keep saying that he needs to unite. The party's united. There is no fracture in this party. Sure,
51-49.
You should have splinters, but this is a party that has one focus and one focus only, and that's to beat Justin Trudeau in 2019. They have raised so much money. They've out-fundraised the Liberals nearly double. They've doubled the amount of Conservative memberships across the country. And, there's been this argument that having 13 or 14 of them in the race was a bad idea, that the rules were set up, in a way that it kept too many people in. No one could really gain traction. But then you also have 14 people across the country with their campaign teams selling memberships and sort of preaching that Conservative gospel. So I don't know where this narrative is coming from, that there needs to be this great uniter. Ronna Ambrose, as the interim leader, handled that after the election.
So, John, what do you think? Where does this leave the party now?
Look, I think the Republican Party in the United States thought they were united because they just wanted to beat Obama and then beat Clinton, and look what happened to them. I think if you look at Harper...
Trump was never really a Republican. Yeah. So.
True, but if you look at Harper, one of Harper's greatest virtue was also his greatest liability, is that he was completely ruthless, and he expunged from the party any sort of opposition to his policies. If anything, I think Scheer's problem is that he's apparently, by all accounts, maybe too nice a guy. And he's going to have at least two sources of opposition with the party. He's going to have people who are Islamophobes, who all they want to do is create social panic about Muslim immigration, the sort of people...
7% though.
7%, but it's still a constituency. And maybe you've got 10 or 15% of people who are hardcore social conservatives. I think Harper appeased the first of those two minor constituencies and suppressed the second. I think in Scheer's case, he's going to have to suppress both of those minor constituencies within his own party to get the sort of unification.
No, I would agree with that aspect of it. Absolutely, no question about it. Scheer has also got a challenge because he wasn't a cabinet minister during Harper's government. He was the Speaker of the House, so he never had to go defend government policy. He never had to be really battle tested. Scrumming with the media and things like that. Those are challenges for him, to be sure. But I do believe he is. What we saw last night was indicative that it's still very much a Stephen Harper party, and I think Scheer can deal with those different factions of the party in order so they don't take over any of their legislation.
I was just going to say that that's all well and good, and I think that's good for conservatives to be the continuation of Stephen Harper, but for a lot of Canadians, that's not exactly what they want. So it'll be interesting to see how he pivots in a 2019 general election when you're appealing to all Canadians, when, you look at the millennial vote next time around will outnumber the boomer vote. So these are things that conservatives are going to have to deal with, and if you're on the record as denying climate change or not thinking it's a serious problem, when it's like almost the number one issue with a lot of millennial voters, it ends up being a bit of a disconnect.
I don't think he's denying climate change. He doesn't believe in carbon taxes, and that's a position in Saskatchewan that's incredibly popular where he's from as well. And I think that a lot of people also don't like carbon, even in Ontario where we have a cap and trade system. So I think that there's arguments he can make around those issues that could appeal to conservatives, not necessarily alienate all the millennial voters, but I think to the point...
conservative stuff, though, may alienate all millennial voters. So that's something that I think even amongst me and my group of friends, we would never vote for anybody.
Yeah, but that's how much that comes out. And it depends how much that comes out. And that's what I'm saying. Walking that line, I agree as to walk that line, but I don't think that I think he is a very affable individual. He also has a good grasp of French. I was sitting at the desk of Radio-Canada last night, and he did a full interview in French, and you could tell he understood, too.
Kelly Leitch did not do very well. Was that a surprise, and what does that mean, John?
I think the social panic over Muslims, I think it peaked in the last 6 months of Harper's tenure. Canada has already had that moment. It was a very unattractive moment politically for Canada. Panic over the niqab, over children wearing turbans on soccer fields in Quebec, and I think people were a little bit sick of that. And I think, 15%, 10-15%, whatever her constituency was, I think that's probably representative of the constituency within the party.
She got 7% of the vote. That's the interesting thing. She kept saying in every email that you would get from her campaign, 74% of Canadians agree with her Canadian values test proposition. I don't know where they were on voting day, but they're not in the Conservative Party.
Got to wrap up in 30 seconds. Supriya and then Adrian Quick.
I was just going to say one of the reasons why I think Kelly Leitch sort of flamed out towards the end is because a lot of what she was touting was that she was going to be Trump light. But I think a lot of Canadians are looking at the way the Trump administration is unfolding and going, whoa, we don't want that even in its light form.
Yeah, I think that it was obvious to me that her voters were one-issue voters, and that was it. They didn't seem to want to give her all of their support. It went elsewhere, but it's going forward for the Conservative Party. This is going to be interesting times.
Well, they're all in the House tomorrow. We'll see how he does on the unity front and on everything. Thanks so much to all of you. When we come back.